4 of anime's most infamous villains were actually right. Each one looked at a rotting system, saw exactly what was wrong with it, and decided the only fix was mass murder, dressed up as mercy. But if they all saw the truth clearly, why did every single one of them reach for the same monstrous cure? Itachi Uchiha, Naruto. A 13-year-old boy walked through his own house and killed everyone in it. Not strangers, not soldiers. His father, his mother, cousins he'd grown up sparring with, elders who'd bounced him on their knee as a baby. He left exactly one person breathing in the entire compound. And that person was his little brother, the one he made watch. That's the act. Everything else is the excuse. And the excuse happens to be true. Itachi Uchiha was Anbu Black Ops before most kids finish middle school, which meant Konoha's leadership had already decided he was a weapon before he'd decided anything for himself. His own clan, paranoid and sidelined by the village they'd helped build, was gearing up for a coup, not a protest. A coup, with troop movements and a timeline, the kind of thing that doesn't stay contained inside one village's walls. Konoha sat at the center of a fragile web of alliances between nations that had been at open war within living memory. Pull one thread like a full-scale Uchiha uprising and you don't just get a civil war. You risk dragging every allied and rival nation back into the kind of conflict that had already killed a generation. So the village elders gave Itachi a mission: eliminate the coup by eliminating the clan behind it. All of it, every adult who could pick up a weapon. Itachi didn't argue. He didn't stall. He accepted an order to erase his own bloodline to prevent a war that, statistically, would have killed exponentially more people, shinobi and civilians both, than the massacre itself. Judged purely on the math, it's the coldest, most defensible logic in the entire series. Fewer graves this way. That's the whole pitch. And it's also, obviously, insane. Nothing in canon confirms there was a cleaner path sitting on the table that night, but follow the pattern anyway. Itachi was one of the most gifted tacticians the Leaf Village ever produced. A kid who could outthink grown men twice his rank, and the solution he executed with that intellect was total annihilation carried out personally, by hand, in a single night. Not exile, not a negotiated stand-down, not turning key conspirators in one at a time and letting due process, however slow, take its course. A story that spends this much time proving Itachi's genius never quite explains why genius topped out at kill everyone. It reads less like the only option, and more like the option a village desperate to avoid its own culpability found easiest to order a child into carrying out. That's the sentence this whole video is going to keep circling back to. A correct diagnosis, paid for with the largest possible body count, delivered by the person best positioned to know better. Because here's what makes Itachi different from a state executioner following a checklist. He loved his brother, genuinely, specifically, in a way the series never lets you doubt. And the plan he built after the massacre wasn't mercy towards Sasuke. It was cruelty, engineered on purpose, because he needed Sasuke to hate him enough to survive it. Think about the actual mechanics of what he chose. He could have vanished. He could have let Sasuke believe he was dead, or missing, or simply gone, and let the boy grieve a tragedy instead of hunting a traitor. Instead, he stood in that room and let a child watch, because a dead villain doesn't give a 7-year-old a reason to get stronger every single morning. A hated one does. Itachi didn't vanish after that night, either. He joined Akatsuki, the exact organization hunting Konoha from the shadows, and played the role of international terrorist for years. Interrogated allies, threatened villages, let the entire ninja world believe he was a mass-murdering psychopath with no loyalty to anything, no line he wouldn't cross, no family he wouldn't burn twice if it served him. All of it theater. A double agent feeding intelligence back to the village that ordered him to slaughter his own family, and all of it aimed at one target, making sure Sasuke grew up burning with enough hatred and purpose to become powerful, rather than broken. He didn't just take his brother's family. He took his brother's ability to ever see him as anything but a monster, and he did it deliberately, as a gift. That's not a man solving a political problem. That's a man who decided the person he loved most needed a villain to survive, and volunteered himself for eternal casting. He wrote himself into the story as the thing Sasuke would spend his whole life trying to destroy, on purpose, with open eyes, because the alternative was a little brother who curled up and stopped fighting. He got everything he calculated for. Konoha stood. The coup never happened. The war never spread. The clan that would have dragged half the continent back into open conflict was gone, quietly, in a single night, instead of loudly, over years. And the one person he did it all for spent the next decade of his life trying to hunt him down and kill him, exactly as planned, exactly as intended. but he at least killed for a village that ordered it and a brother he loved. What happens when the man deciding who dies isn't following anyone's orders and has crowned himself the emperor he's rebelling against? Lelouch Lamperouge. Code guess. Lelouch v. Britannia looked at a broken world and decided the fix was to become the single worst thing in it. Not defeat it, not expose it. Become it on purpose, with a face and a name attached so the entire planet had someone to hate together. Area 11 used to be Japan, back when it was allowed to have a name at all. Britannia conquered it, renamed it like a shelf item, and rebuilt the entire society around one rule. Britannians on top, 11s on the bottom, no appeals. Nightmare frames patrolled the streets, military police could execute a citizen for stepping wrong, no trial required, no explanation owed. Political voice for the conquered was exactly zero. This was the same machine that ground Itachi's entire clan down to a single order sheet, just running on a national scale instead of a family one, and Lelouch had a front row seat to both the Empire's cruelty and its bloodline, because he was born inside the family that built the machine. So he built the Black Knights and started a war. That part is the easy version, the one that fits on a poster. Lelouch commanding an army, Lelouch in the mask, Lelouch winning battles with Gyes and a god complex. The actual plan underneath it is so much colder than that poster suggests, and it only gets colder the closer you look. Gyes gave him one absolute command, usable once per person, and he spent it like a scalpel instead of a hammer. He forced enemy commanders to kill their own troops. He rewrote the loyalty of entire divisions with a single sentence, no army required. He orchestrated the death of his own father, the sitting emperor, and then sat down on that same throne wearing the crown of the empire he'd spent years trying to burn to the ground. Zero, the masked revolutionary, became Lelouch Vassavon Britannia, the 99th emperor, ruler of the very system he built his whole rebellion to destroy. And once he had it, he used the throne exactly the way you'd expect a liberator to, which is to say, he didn't. He crushed nations. He annexed territory. He let the world watch him behave like the most dangerous tyrant humanity had ever produced, worse than his own father, worse than the empire at its cruelest, because that was the design, not a failure of one. A world convinced it was staring at the ultimate villain had exactly one thing left to do: unite against him. Every country that hated each other 5 minutes earlier suddenly had a shared enemy standing in the same room. That's Zero Requiem. Not a battle plan. A death plan, built years in advance, engineered so that killing Lelouch would be the one act that could actually hold former enemies together. Every move he made on that throne, every conquered territory, every horrified headline, was one more brick in a scaffold designed to collapse on exactly one day. Suzaku, his closest friend turned rival turned executioner, puts a sword through him in front of the entire planet. Lev, unmissable, undeniable. The tyrant dies. The world exhales. Peace gets a body to bury and a villain to point at, which turns out to be the only kind of peace people actually trust. Before the Blade, though, he'd already dismantled the caste system he'd spent the whole war raging against. 11s stopped being 11s. The machinery of second-class citizenship that defined Area 11 got taken apart from the inside by the same man wearing the crown of its architects. He didn't just fight the discrimination from the outside with an army. He inherited the exact chair that enforced it and used it to legislate the thing out of existence before letting Suzaku end him for the cameras. It is, by any honest measure, an insane way to fix a country. It is also, by the show's own math, the only way that worked. Burn the empire down from a throne built inside it, then hand the ashes back to the people who used to be crushed under it. Does it actually last, though? Nothing in the story confirms this outright, but follow where the pattern leads. A peace built entirely on the presence of one shared enemy is a peace with an expiration date stitched into its foundation, because the moment nobody remembers Zero, there's no reason left to stay unified. Lelouch didn't remove the hatred that built the caste system in the first place. He gave it somewhere else to point, permanently, by dying in front of everyone. That's not the same as curing it. That's just aiming it once and hoping it stays aimed, and hoping is not a policy. And that's the part that lands the same punch Itachi's story already threw, just harder. Nobody handed Lelouch this decision. No Council of Elders, no Danzo whispering orders from the shadows, no mission briefing he could point to later and blame. He looked at a world that needed a monster and a martyr in the same body and cast himself as both, on his own authority, because he'd decided he was the one person qualified to carry it. A boy who wanted his little sister to grow up somewhere the world wouldn't grind her down, and who convinced himself that erasing everything else, his name, his face, his own future, was an acceptable price for her one shot at that world, he at least died for his utopia. But what about the man who decided the fastest way to save the world was to appoint himself its god and never planned to leave? Light Yagami, Death Note, crime dropped worldwide. Not in a manga panel, not in a fan theory, but as the actual stated fact of the story itself. War slowed down. Governments went on record admitting it, quietly in the kind of language that usually only shows up after a miracle or a disaster. A teenager with a notebook did what the United Nations couldn't manage in decades of summits and sanctions, and that's the part that should terrify you more than any of the killing. Light Yagami didn't start as a monster. He started as the kid who scored first in the entire country on every national exam, the one heading to 2-0 University, because he was simply built different, smarter than everyone else in the room every single time. Teachers loved him. Parents used him as the example, the kid you held up to your own disappointing children at dinner. Then he found a notebook that kills anyone whose name gets written in it, tested it once on a criminal already on the news, and watched it work exactly as advertised. No delay, no ambiguity, just a name and a heart attack that lined up perfectly with what the book promised. That's the pitch. Clean hands, dirty world, a tool that only touches the guilty. For a while, that's basically what happened. Light targeted violent offenders first, the ones the courts were too slow or too soft to actually stop, and criminals started dying faster than police departments could process the paperwork. Crime rates fell off a cliff. Public polls showed huge chunks of the population thought the world had genuinely gotten safer overnight. Cops started quietly rooting for Kira instead of hunting him. Regular people lit candles for him like he was a saint doing overtime shifts. Nobody asked him to work. And here's the part nobody wants to sit with. They weren't wrong about the results. The numbers were real. Fewer murders, fewer robberies, entire criminal networks going quiet because getting caught suddenly meant a heart attack with your name attached to it. Light built the closest thing to measurable global peace on this entire list, and he built it with a pen and a notebook he kept hidden under his floorboards. Not a super weapon, not an army, a pen. Think about that for a second. Every government on Earth throwing money and soldiers at problems this kid solved from his bedroom, doing homework in between. But watch where the targets start drifting. It doesn't stay clean for long. Investigators die. FBI agents die, sent in specifically to find him, and erased for getting close. One by one, families never told why, never given a reason to grieve besides the official paperwork. A private detective's fiancée dies just for standing near the truth at the wrong moment. A police chief's own daughter becomes a weapon in his hand, manipulated into doing his killing for him without her even understanding what she's holding. Rival Kiras, people who agreed with his entire mission and wanted the exact same world he did, get executed the second they threaten his control of it. By the time Light is writing names to protect his own identity instead of protecting the public, the math is quietly flipped on him. He's not judging criminals anymore. He's judging anyone standing between him and the throne. That's not a slow corruption creeping in over time. That's the actual design revealing itself. Light never wanted a safer world to hand back to anyone. He wanted a safer world he personally ruled, worshipped as a god, by a population too afraid to ask who elected him in the first place. Every justification about slow courts and lenient sentencing was true, right up until the moment it stopped being about justice and started being about Light needing to be the one holding the pen forever. The evidence for the cause was real. The verdict he built on top of it was never actually about the evidence. Compare that to a kid who once put on a mask specifically so his own death would mean something. Lelouch built his throne knowing it had an expiration date stitched into the plan from day one, a finish line he designed himself and walked toward on purpose. Light builds his and starts killing the people who might make him step down. Same crown, completely different reason for wearing it. One of them was always planning to hand the world back. The other one was planning to keep it forever, no matter who ended up in the ground because of it. And somewhere in every one of those names he writes, there's a brother, a father, a partner, someone who loved that criminal, that agent, that rival, the exact same way Light's own father loved him right up until the moment he found out what his son had actually become. Light never once let himself count that cost. He just kept writing, night after night, name after name, treating a heart attack like a rounding error in a much bigger equation, a number that never quite made it onto his own personal scoreboard. Kira didn't fail because the world rejected him. Plenty of the world didn't. Cops rooted for him. Civilians prayed to him. Actual candlelight vigils for a serial killer with better ratings than most elected officials. Kira failed because his own definition of justice couldn't survive contact with a single person who genuinely challenged it. A god who has to keep killing just to protect his own throne was never running a justice system in the first place. He was running an empire with better PR and a higher body count than he'd ever admit to. And the second anyone got close enough to see the accounting, they went in the notebook too. He wanted to be a god of a smaller world. But there was a man before all of them who looked at the exact same problem, did the math, and decided the only way to actually end the killing was to make sure nobody was ever awake to do it again. Madara Uchiha, Naruto. Madara Uchiha built the village that would come to fear him, and then he decided the only way to fix the world was to make sure nobody in it ever had to wake up again. That is not an exaggeration, and it is not a metaphor either. He co-founded Konohagakure with Hashirama Senju to end centuries of clan warfare, the same warfare that had already cost him brothers, a father, and eventually the fight for his own life. He gave everything to that project. The village worked for a while, then it didn't, and Madara watched his own solution curdle into the same old machine, just wearing a new headband and calling itself Peace. The Uchiha, his own clan, got treated like a threat to monitor instead of a family that helped build the place from the ground up, segregated into their own district, watched constantly, distrusted by the exact village they bled for during the wars that founded it. That is not a theory pulled from fan forums or a stretch someone made in a comment section. That is what happens on screen decades later, canon, undeniable, right there in the story. It means the man everyone calls a monster called this exact betrayal before it ever happened. So Madara looks at all of it. The wars, the coups, the surveillance, the endless replacement of one grudge with a slightly newer grudge wearing a different face. And he reaches a conclusion. Ninja history does not have isolated tragedies scattered across generations. It has one tragedy, wearing different masks, repeating itself forever. Hatred breeds revenge. Revenge breeds hatred. And nobody in charge has ever once broken that loop through politics or treaties or a village founded on genuinely good intentions. He tried that. He co-signed it with his own name. He watched it fail from the inside. His answer is the Eye of the Moon plan. Trap every human being on Earth inside the infinite Tsukuyomi, a genjutsu cast across the entire sky, and let everyone live out a perfect dream instead of the miserable, blood-soaked reality underneath it. No armies, no betrayals, no orphaned kids growing up to become the next generation's weapon. Just an eternal, peaceful sleep for the entire species, whether the species agrees to it or not. Consent was never part of the pitch, and when he comes back during the Fourth Great Ninja War, he does not need help proving his point. One man, alone, tears through entire divisions of the Allied shinobi forces, an army built from every nation that spent generations trying to kill each other and somehow united anyway. He is not just powerful. He is a walking demonstration of exactly the kind of unstoppable violence he claims to be ending forever. The cure and the disease share a face, and Madara is standing right there wearing it. This is the part that lines up every villain this video has walked through so far. Light wanted a world with no criminals and built a throne to rule it from. Lelouch wanted a world with no more Britannias and became the empire he was tearing down to get there. Itachi wanted his little brother alive and became the reason that brother spent his whole life wanting to kill him. Madara wants a world with no more hatred, and his plan is to switch off the entire species and dream it into submission. Same diagnosis, repeated 4 separate times. Same cure, just scaled up until it swallows the whole planet. That is the part worth sitting with. His read on the shinobi world is not wrong. War does repeat itself. Grudges do get inherited like property, passed down whether anyone asked for them or not. The Uchiha genuinely were treated as suspects for the crime of existing, but the leap from this system cannot fix itself to therefore nobody gets to choose their own reality. Ever again is not proven anywhere in the story. Nobody hands Madara a spreadsheet showing every alternative already failed. He just stops believing one could ever work, and the show never really tests whether he is right about that. It just lets him act on it anyway. That is the leap none of them earn. Not Madara, not Light, not Lelouch, and in his own smaller, quieter way, not Itachi either. Each one convinces himself he is the singular exception, the one person who can hold civilization-ending power and still remain the good guy underneath it. None of them are. Power does not politely wait for good intentions to run out before it starts corroding something, which means the moon-sized dream is not actually the biggest villainy on this list. It is the smallest one, just dressed in the grandest costume Naruto could possibly build for it. Because underneath the god-tier genjutsu and the army of one, Madara is doing the exact same thing Itachi did in a single bloody night inside his own compound. He looked at a problem too large and too old to fix, and instead of finding a harder answer, he chose the easiest one available to a man with enough strength to make it stick. Not justice, not real peace, just an ending, permanent and total, mistaken for mercy because it was final. They were not wrong about the world. Every one of them, from the boy with a notebook to the boy who loved his brother into ash, looked straight at something genuinely broken and named it correctly. What they got wrong was themselves. Each one believed he alone could hold that much power and still know exactly when to stop, and nobody ever does. Not once. The moon did not need to be a god's weapon to enslave humanity for its own good. It just needed to belong to a man tired enough to call surrender salvation. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.